Chapter 11. Thrain and Company, Chapter 5. When the group awoke they looked into their bags for breakfast, forgetting they ate the last of their food before sleeping.
Anyone else run out of food too?
Garen asked casually as he searched his bag.
Yeah, there is nothing to be found in my bag,
Adeline said. Everyone else concurred the same thing.
We must have eaten the last of our rations at dinner,
Thrain said, putting his bag down and thinking things over. He looked to Vera and asked,
Vera, can you teleport back to the capital and then back into this floor with more food supplies? Teleport out to the base floor, then to the capital?
Yes, Vera said.
But teleport back in, specifically to this floor, I don't believe that's possible. This tower has some ancient and powerful magic in it. For all I know, trying to teleport into the tower from the outside could evaporate me or something. Besides, I made no headway in my research at all, and don't feel like returning empty-handed. You guys knowin' that there be some fresh bountiful food all around you, right?
Kurth asked, jumping into the conversation. Everyone looked over to him and saw that he, and Lessa, were standing there casually eating the purple oval fruit-like stuff that was growing from the violet trees on the floor.
What the hell are you doing?
Thrain asked in shock.
That stuff could be highly poisonous, spit it out.
Kurth took a huge bite of the fruit and chewed carelessly.
Bah, this stuff ain't no poison, it's fruit, and damned good too.
Thrain sighed and ran a hand through his dark hair, annoyed and running out of ideas. He turned his back from everyone while contemplating what to do next. Eventually he said,
Alright, I will try some of this fruit too, and we will camp out here on this floor for a bit. If neither me, Kurth, or Lessa get sick by the time we get another full rest and wake, then we will continue on and eat the fruit as our new source of nutrition. While we wait, Vera, Iris, see if you two can get along long enough to study this fruit, maybe you can find out more about it.
Thrain plucked one of the fruits from the nearest tree. He studied it closely for a time, then glanced over to Kurth and Lessa, who were just now finishing theirs. Still reluctant, he bit into the fruit. It was juicy and tasted good, like a perfect mix of blue and black berries.
Well, it doesn't taste poisonous, but still, we will stick with my plan to be on the safer side of this,
Thrain said. Vera and Iris then plucked some fruit from the tree to start studying with their magic. While they did, everyone else sat around telling stories to pass the time, until eventually they all got tired enough and went to sleep. When next they woke, Thrain, Kurth, and Lessa were all perfectly healthy and feeling absolutely fine. Vera and Iris confirmed they didn't find anything dangerous in the fruit, but studying it on the spot was not ideal, and they wouldn't fully know what's in it unless they got it back to the alchemy lab. They all looked to Thrain now to see how they should proceed, though most of them were already setting their sights on eating the fruits.
Alright, we will all start eating this fruit, but if one of us gets sick then we stop, and Vera, Iris, you two teleport back to the capital to restock on provisions, got it?
Everyone agreed, and soon as they plucked some fruit from the trees they began to gorge on it. These were people who were not well accustomed to going too long without food. The next floor the group climbed to was the first floor, where the ground was slanted like they were on some hills. They soon thought some type of mountains, as they were in a warm yellow-lit area, reminiscent of outside, with stone pathways under their feet and large smooth-cut boulders all around as far as they could see. Kurth took the lead on this floor with a big smile.
Now this is more like it. Lads,
Kurth said enthusiastically. Garen smirked and said,
sounds like you found your home away from home. And don't you know it?
He took in a deep breath through his nose.
And it even smells like the mountain tops. Oh, this place be good. I agree, it is nice to see a floor that's a lot less surreal,
Iris said with a smile. As everyone moved forward enjoying their new environment, a tall grey skeletal monster with thin hind legs and what appeared to be some sorts of long scythes for its hands, stepped out from some jagged rocks and screeched with an ear-pitching cry of battle. The strange monster rushed forth with great speed, its appearance alone catching everyone off guard. It aimed for Kurth, who could only hold his arms out to defend himself. As it got into striking distance and swung its arm out at him. As it did, a blur of even greater speed rushed forth, getting between them. Thrain swung his sword with as much force as he could muster to meet the monster's attack. The monster's scythe hand met the blade directly and pushed through all of Thrain's force, throwing him straight back as if he was weightless. He hit one of the boulders hard, but his armor protected him from most of the damage. Kurth backed away with only a light graze on his forearm. The monster turned away from Kurth and charged straight at Thrain, who was just now sitting up. It came too close to strike with its arms and instead bent down and dived its shark-like towards him, trying to bite his face off. Thrain rolled under the monster just in time as it missed and slammed its head into the boulder. He came up to his knees from the roll and pivoted his hips, swinging his sword at the monster's leg. The blade got partially stuck in it but didn't lop it off, like Thrain intended. Fearing a recoil attack of some sort, Thrain didn't hesitate to pull the blade and dive away from the monster. By then everyone else had drawn their weapons in preparation, save for the few who had no weapons but prepared themselves in their own way. The grey monster turned around slowly. In its mouth they could see chunks of rocks cracking between long rows of very sharp little teeth, exactly like a shark's. The rocks shattered apart and the monster spit them out, then charged at the group. This time the monster was met with a blitz of fireballs and lightning coming from Vera and Iris. The attacks hurled the monster on its back, but it was back on its legs in seconds, virtually unscathed. Adeline loosed an arrow from her bow as it hit her target, soaring straight into its eye. It screeched in pain, and slowed a little, but was very much alive. While the monster was distracted briefly, Kurthbull charged at it and tackled it to the ground. Kurth was stronger and smarter, but as he wrestled around with it, the monster displayed its hidden flexibility and managed to maneuver around him and get on top. Adeline at that moment loosed another arrow aimed for the back of its neck. Though Kurth kicked it off him just before then, and the arrow instead shot straight through the monster's back and emerged from the chest. It shrieked once and fell down. No one knew if it was really dead for sure and proceeded with caution towards it, except for Kurth, who walked right up to it. He started feeling the monster's skin, its legs and arms, everywhere. When he made it to the back around the arrow, he said,
"Well, this is an interest."
He plucked the arrow out of it and said,
"Looks like there is a very small soft spot on this backside here, blends right in with every other part of it."
Adeline came up, still wary of the monster, and took her arrow and said,
"Great, we found its weakness. Now what in the fuck is it?" "My best guess is a demon,"
Thrain said.
"It looks like we found the tower's inhabitants at last." "There could be more of these things coming by now. We should go back down to the other floor and watch the stairs while we recover,"
Rugal said, looking around for signs of more of them.
"I ain't about to be running away from these. I wants a rematch with one of these bastards,"
Kurth said.
"No, Rugal is right,"
Thrain said.
"If more do show up, and in greater numbers, we will be in serious trouble. We should go rest on the floor below. We will return here when all of us are ready. Kurth, you go down the stairs first so I know you don't delay, and Garen, you go last and watch our backs. If one of them shows up, holler down to us."
Kurth was reluctant but went down the stairs first. The others followed while Garen held his sword out in front of him, keeping a vigilant eye. When nothing showed up, and the others were already going down the stairs, he too descended them. They took rest a few hundred yards from the stairs leading up. They wanted to be prepared to fight or run should more of those demons show up down and come down. When nothing came for more than an hour, they all relaxed much more. Kurth had his forearm cleaned and wrapped up with bandages, and Thrain closely examined his sword. Rugal took a seat next to him and said,
"I can't believe that thing just batted you aside like you were a doll. It's strong, yes, but its reliance is what scares me the most. Twice had I taken my best shots with this adamantite blade on it, and both times it should have been severely damaged. Instead, the first time its sidearm thingy just countered the blade perfectly. And then when I went to cut its leg off, it got stuck partially in it,"
Rugal finished for him.
"Yeah, it's a scary thought. What should we do if we run into more of them and have to fight? They only have one weakness we know of."
Thrain sighed and said,
"Yes, but it is a big one. Still, we must proceed with utmost caution against them."
He then stood up and called for everyone's attention.
"All right, everyone, we're going to spend the rest of the day or night or whatever fucking time it is down here resting up. I'll take the first watch, then you Garen, then Adeline for the last one. Tomorrow, or when we next wake, we will move on through that floor, avoiding those demons best we can. If however we run into a group of 3 or less, with no others in sight, we will fight them as a team. Me and Kurth will distract them, Iris and Vera will give us support, while the rest of you sneak in around them and target their mid-back areas for the kill. If we see more than 3 at a time, we avoid them or flee. Worst case scenario, we return back down here and start clearing them up little by little a time until a safe path ahead is available to us all. Everyone clear on that?"
Everyone nodded, except for Adeline, who said,
"If there is more than 2 of them, then Lessa will help you distract them."
Thrain went to argue back with her, but Adeline continued,
"Don't even bother Thrain, she's as good as either of you for this task, if not better. And she can camouflage herself to fit in with her surrounding, so she can scout ahead for us next time we're up there."
Silently Thrain thought it over. He knew that he and Kurth could take care of those demons, 2 on 2, if they didn't get the drop on them, but if a third was there then the only way he could pull it off is by using the body enhancement magic and exhaust himself greatly.
Alright, if and only if she can hold her own. If she starts messing up and I tell her to flee, and let me and Kurth handle it, then she better do as I say. Watch, she will do better than you two,
Adeline said with a cocky grin.
Thrain, you can't seriously be thinking of letting her fight one of those demons.
Garen protested.
She's but a child.
Thrain turned to Garen and said,
not fight, no, just distract, and again only if she can handle it. And if not? What if it overwhelms her right away and neither of you can save her? Sorry, we thought she was stronger. Is that what you would say if she dies because of you? She's stronger than any of you are giving her credit,
Adeline intervened.
And she can understand everything we are saying.
Garen looked over to Lessa. She looked infuriated and ready to fight anyone now. He shook his head and said,
I'm still not fully okay with this, and if it comes to a fight then I'm going to be waiting back to support her when things go bad.
He then turned and started walking off in a huff. Rugal went to chase after him, but Thrain grabbed his shoulder, stopping him and said,
let him go, he needs time alone to vent it out.
Rugal shrugged Thrain's hand off and chased after Garen. Rugal caught up to Garen and started walking beside him at his brisk pace.
If it makes you feel better, I agree with you, he said.
Garen slowed down but didn't stop and said,
it's not right, she shouldn't even be here, she's too young for this sort of place.
Rugal nodded his head to the side and said,
maybe, but then again, she's only a couple years younger than us, I think. Adeline only told me she's older than she appears, but never specified her age. She says her maturity is that of a woman in her 20s though. And she did admit that Lessa has, in many ways, surpassed her.
Garen let out a big sigh and said,
yeah, I'm sure you are right, but there's more to it than that. This place, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like it's changing us, very slowly. How do you mean?
Rugal asked, highly intrigued.
I'm not sure, but to start, our sense of time is beyond lost by now, at least mine is. I can no longer tell how much an hour is or how long we've been asleep. That, and I completely lost count of how many days we have been in here or what floor we are on. Well, I don't think the floor number matters, since we don't know how many there are until the top one, but by my count we have been climbing for somewhere over 60 days now.
Garen looked at his friend surprised he was able to keep up that count so well or remember that number. Rugal shrugged and said,
I just been writing small lines in my little notebook after every long period of rest. I'm not sure how accurate it is, since I too lost count of how much time an hour is anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's close enough. I mean, it's not like we have a couple of magisters who could just tell the time for us or anything like that.
They both chuckled.
Look man, this day, or night, whatever, has been really stressful on all of us. I mean, we go this long without seeing any demons, so of course we get skeptical about them being real, even in this place. And that thing was a nightmare. I'm sure as hell not sleeping easy myself, if at all. It's like we're in a whole new world of sorts up here, filled with horrendous nightmares the deeper we go, so we can't be fighting with each other like that again. We don't know what lies ahead in this place, and the best way to be prepared is to make sure we can trust each other and watch one another's backs. We got caught off guard as much as I think we will ever be again, but we came out with barely any injuries. You're right, let's head back to camp and rest up. Well then, that was a bit of melodrama,
Vera said, casually sliding next to Iris.
I think I will take melodrama any day over a horrific surprise with that demon on the other floor,
Iris said, watching Rugal chase after Garen as he stormed off.
You and me both, sister, by the way, nice job on the lightning. Wish I thought of that.
Iris grinned and said,
thanks, though I was trying to do a lot more than just slow it down briefly. Yeah, me too,
Vera admitted. She then took a seat and Iris joined her.
You're from the Zorfin family, are you not? Yes, I'm the youngest daughter. And you're the great Magister Cambron's apprentice, right? I outgrew the title of apprentice years ago, but yes, Cambron still teaches me some new things now and again. Anyways, I want to know about you. How did you and Rugal end up together? Was it arranged?
Iris blushed a little thinking about it and said,
no, it was nothing like that. In fact, we met when we're both very young at a ball, neither of us knew who the other was at the time though. I remember how handsome he was in his formal attire. I thought he was a noble or another highborn, I didn't even think that he was the prince. Well, he saw me, came over, and asked me to dance with him. I was a terrible dancer and kept stepping on his toes, but he only smiled and guided me through the moves, twirling me around when he saw I was getting too nervous again. Before long it was like everyone else around us disappeared and it was only me and him, dancing around to our heart's content.
Vera took notice how Iris' eyes seemed to sparkle even now thinking back to that magical evening of hers. But her story was not done just yet.
I remember, after we were too tired to dance, he took me out to the balcony for some fresh air, said that I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life. He was so charming and handsome, it wasn't until later I found out he was the prince. I then thought any chance I had with him was lost, especially when he found out that my family was a service family to the kingdom, providing some of the best magisters from our home, and training other ones who always came out great. But when the prince came over for an unofficial visit a couple months after the ball, he treated me the same as when we first met, even knowing my family title. He didn't care, and was in fact happy to see that I, for the most part, treated him the same as I had before. And it's as simple as that really. We have been in love since that day, and Rugal would come visit me often as he could. We intended to marry this summer but we had to put it off because of this stupid fucking tower.
She punched the ground in rage, as if that would do anything. When Iris finished her little fit of slamming her fists on the ground, she looked back up to Vera and said,
"Alright, your turn, tell me how you got to where you are now. And where you are now in general."
Vera moaned in annoyance and said,
"I'm next in line to title of Grand Magister. After Cameron passes away, I'm even on the King's Council as a secondary advisor."
Iris laughed awkwardly, trying to make herself sound nonchalant, and said,
That is impressive. I'm sorry, I should know at least that much, but we're a little secluded on this stuff sometimes at Layfire. I don't really keep up with current events much. I'm either too busy studying, training, or spending time with Rugal." "Okay, whatever, my story isn't all that exciting. Like most magisters, when my powers developed I was picked up for special military training. I spent a couple years in a group home of magisters under the tutorship of the Baylor family. 5 great magisters trying to teach a group of 18 kids at once must have been a nightmare for them. But moving on, I was the most outstanding pupil they had in years to come, and so when the Grand Magister Cameron came around to search out candidates for his apprentice I was a strong recommendation. Of course he didn't pick me up right away, which to me was both disappointing and a relief since I didn't want to leave my lover so soon. It's hard to find good girls, especially back then. So yeah, he came back a few months later, asked me if I would like to apprentice under him. I asked him if I had much choice in the matter. He told me I did, and that if I joined him I would have many more choices of my own in the future than I would if I stayed there. He gave me a day to think about it, and the next morning I went with him.
After Vera said nothing more for a time, Iris asked,
"And, that's it?"
Vera shrugged and said,
"Yeah, pretty much. Said goodbye to my first lover and moved on with my life, end of story." You're right, my story was better."
Iris smirked playfully and the two laughed lightly. Adeline rolled around in her sleep, starting to wake up. The light sound of far-off whispers troubled her, speaking too quiet to understand but loud enough to know it was voices she was hearing. Eventually the soft whispers woke her up and she slowly opened her eyes into a dreary state. It was dark around her, darker than any night she ever knew outside. She could see no one else around, and this frightened her. She tossed her camp blanket off her and rose to her feet, shaking off her slumber like fugue. She called out quietly to her comrades. No one answered. The whispers began to grow louder yet still incomprehensible. Soon gleaming red eyes, in pairs of 2 and 4, emerged from the perfect darkness around her. She reached down for her weapons but they were all gone. Even her blanket, which she just had moments ago, was nowhere around her. The whispers turned into loud voices surrounding her now, still she couldn't understand them. Before she went mad and shouted in frustration, her eyes snapped open and she felt a hand on her shoulder, lightly gripping her. Thrain was knelt right in front of her, trying to gently wake her up. When he saw the look on her face he frowned and asked,
"Adeline, are you alright?"
Adeline slowly got up, looked around her. Everyone was still around. Then she said,
Yeah, I'm fine, just had a bit of a night terror is all."
Thrain looked around the group as well and said,
"I don't think any of us got much good rest after the events earlier."
He rose to his feet as Adeline climbed to hers.
"Go eat some breakfast and start getting ready. Soon we will go back up to the next floor, and I hope that Lessa is as good as you say because one way or the other we're getting past that floor and moving up."
Chapter 12 Irene the Sly, Chapter 3 After a couple days of riding from the city, during one of their breaks, Kale finally asked Irene what she managed to steal from the vault. She said very little and handed him the bag. He first pulled out the rolled-up cloak and studied it carefully.
Well, I will be damned, they are certainly going to miss this piece,
Kale said.
What is it?
Irene asked. Kale chuckled a little and said,
Don't even know what you stole, that's funny. It is a vanishing cloak, extremely hard to make a good one. I heard they traded with Dorgal for this piece. You made a great find on this.
Then he stood up and wrapped the cloak around him, pulling the hood up, and within moments he was entirely gone, faded in thin air. Irene jumped to her feet and stepped back in surprise and fear. Moments later Kale reappeared just a little off from where he was standing, the hood down but cloak still wrapped around him. After some more study he got bored and rolled the cloak back up and tossed it to her.
Good to know it works, and is simple to use, but you keep it, I can't fight properly with that thing wrapped all tight around me.
He then went back into the bag and pulled out the small dagger. Kale removed it from its sheath and studied it. Then he pushed the end of it into the leather armor on his wrist and pulled it back out right away.
I see now. This must be the infamous piercing dagger, said to be able to pierce through any armor, metal, magic, or otherwise.
He put the blade back into the sheath and tossed it to Irene along with the bag.
You may not have been able to grab much, but you were able to acquire some great treasures.
Irene put them back into the bag and asked,
So you're letting me keep them?
Kale nodded and said,
You earned them, besides I have no particular use for those mystic tools and was able to get away with something thanks to you.
He stood up and pulled out the sword from his belt. It looked like an ordinary sword to Irene, save for the onyx color to it, instead of the normal gray. He swung the blade around as if it was made of bamboo and said,
This is called a crucian blade, better than mithril and matches well-forged adamantite, lighter too. Takes a team of 3, 2 blacksmiths and a magister, to make it. I watched some of them work on one too, it was weeks to complete just one, and that was working tirelessly. Mind you, I was hoping to obtain some mystic plate in there, or at least a crucian shield too. But this enchanted leather I am wearing has served me well in the past, I don't see why it won't do so in the future as well. Anyways, you keep those treasures hidden away in that bag until I tell you it's safe to use them. As for the dagger, I suppose after we get you some new cloths I can start teaching you how to wield it.
The cold winter was fading away, but spring was still not there yet, and the further north they went, the colder it was for Irene. She quickly noticed along the way that they were now moving around the tower instead of straight towards it. They had stopped to rest and eat for a time, and that's when Irene asked Kale why it was they were not going straight to the tower.
The tower is inside the Evercane Kingdom borders, Kale said. And those borders happen to be protected by a great stone wall with many a patrol on top of it. Anyone trying to climb it with, say, a ladder, would be shot down easily by the sentinel archers on top. So we must enter the kingdom through the closest gate, which is in the Kashmir forest. But how do you know they will let us through? Because no logical man would refuse a handful of gold just to keep out a single man and young girl. Not much damage 2 people could do on their own, especially if their intended residence is the tower. Anyways, we're almost there to the small town of Yenmal. My friend will set you up with some proper clothes there. Think you can survive the cold out here a little longer? I know it's much colder the further away we get from the Red Lands, and outside in the open is nothing like sleeping in a house, even a run-down one.
Irene kept as close to the fire as possible, as she always did when they stopped and lit one, and said,
Yes, I can make it, just so long as you keep these fires up along the way.
Kale laughed and said,
You can be sure of that, little missy.
After their meal they moved on and continued for a few more days until they made it to the small town of Yenmal. It was nothing like an air city, thought Irene. The buildings were spaced further apart, and all of them were made of wood or a mixture of straw and wood. Kale led her straight to one of the buildings in the middle of town and found his friend. The woman he was talking about, his friend, was a strange tall woman, wearing a showcase of cheap-looking jewelry all around her body, but with a good designed dress made from a poofy fur. Irene had not seen many women back in an air dress like this. Those that did usually she saw being escorted by different men on different days. Was Kale's friend just like them? Her appearance aside, the woman, Gemma, as Kale called her, was rather kind in comparison to Kale. Although Kale had not been as rough as he first was with Irene. After some words between her and Kale, Gemma escorted Irene to the back room where she measured her entire body, head to toe, and wrote it all down on some parchment. She said not a word during it all and only hummed to herself. When she was done, she told them to come back in a couple days and she would have an old modified outfit made up for Irene. Kale and Gemma then kissed one another's cheeks, and Kale took Irene to the inn, where they found a good warm meal in a single room with 2 beds. That night, while they slept inside the inn, Irene had a nightmare about Elia's death, and woke up in a pool of sweat. She saw there was a small fire going and Kale was sitting on a chair in front of it, with a small liquid jug in one hand.
You had no problem sleeping before, so what's special about tonight?
Kale asked, getting up to grab a second chair and place it alongside the fire. Irene got out of the bed with her blanket wrapped around her and sat in the chair. Kale offered her the jug and she drank from it, immediately spitting the stuff inside of it out and coughing a lot. Kale laughed hard and took the jug from her and drinking it without problem.
What is that stuff?
Irene asked, getting her coughing under control.
It didn't taste very good. It's wine, not the kind of drink you have for the taste, typically. Then why drink it at all? It helps you sleep at night. Drink enough of it and it helps you get through the day, until tomorrow then you need more. Eventually you get used to the taste.
They were silent for a time after that, just gazing into the fire. Irene finally got the nerve up to ask him something she had been wondering about for a while now.
Why are you going to climb the tower anyways? I mean, you seem to have a good life back at ARandomAudiobookAppeared and the guard job appears to pay well, you have all that gold.
Kale chugged down more of the wine before he said anything.
I was once a knight, some time ago, me and my brother Duran. Me and Duran were with the invading forces of the Kashmir forest, 10,000 men all charging the same gate at once. But it wasn't that simple. The gate was located at the edge of the forest with 6 leagues of trees between it and our borders. Take an army of that size in there and most the animals inside don't bother you, they know it's a death wish. But some of the more desperate ones or tamed ones had begun picking away at our troops as we made our way deeper inside. Anyways, needless to say, the Evercane forces had pushed us back from the gate. With the help of the rangers, I was one of the few to set eyes on the thing and still make it out of there alive. Well, the defeat was brutal, and of our 10,000 only about 600 made it out of the forest, me and Duran included. My commander let us stop at a village along the way back to the great city, where a good number of the men went to a tavern for drinks. Me and Duran joined them all a little later. By then most of them were half drunk already. There were as many magisters as there were knights and common soldiers in there, but the magister pricks were arrogant and soon enough started trouble.
Kale spat into the fire and chugged down some more wine before continuing.
They started mouthing off to us how that crushing defeat was all our fault, and so on and so on. Was just one at first, then a couple others joined in. Duran knew if it kept up longer we would be drawing our weapons and preparing to turn against one another. So God bless his soul, he stepped in and talked 2 of the 3 men down, with kind words, a smile, and a round of drinks for them on his account. But that third one couldn't leave well enough alone, and he was offended by Duran's proposal and assaulted him with a blast of magic that threw him clear across the room, breaking his arm. Though Duran was tough, mind you, and fast. He raced across the room, sword drawn, and smacked that magister on the head with the pommel of his sword so hard the man was knocked out cold. His 2 buddies didn't take kind of that, and together they cast a spell of fire that incinerated my brother in agonizing fire. All of us stood up, tension at its peak, swords drawn, magister's spells ready to go. Commander stepped in then, and hollered for everyone to sit back down or he would have their heads for treason. I was still in shock though, couldn't believe my eyes, my little brother dead. Killed right in front of me, and not by the enemy, no, by some drunk and arrogant magisters, and my so-called commander was going to let them off with it too. I rose to my feet, drew my sword and walked up to them when they had their backs turned and chopped their heads clean off. I fled after that, spent a couple years in hiding till I couldn't take that life choice anymore and went back to see the king directly and atone for my actions. I was prepared to be executed. But I was saved by the word of the commander who, apparently, regretted letting those 2 magisters get away so easily with my brother's death that night. So my life was spared but my knighthood revoked and I was set to that guard duty with the mystic vault as another form of punishment. And then came the dream, and blah blah blah.
Kale finished off his jug of wine and tossed it aside, then looked to Irene and asked, "So you think you can sleep a little better now? Knowing your sad story is about the same as everyone else's." Irene scowled at Kale but got up and climbed back into bed, falling asleep not long after. Gemma presented Irene's finished outfit by high noon the next day. It was simple brown fur clothing that fit around Irene well, warming her up greatly, and allowed her to move easy enough. Gemma also offered Irene a tight-fitted dark blue outfit, which was made of a stretchy material and was complete with pants, boots, and a full-sleeved shirt. Kale was adamant about the extra clothing but Gemma insisted. "It's my old ranger's outfit," she said. "For a time I thought being a ranger would be fun and exciting, took me 3 weeks to grow bored of it.
Anyways, I couldn't find it in me to throw it out, nor could I just sell it off. But you, my dear, I feel it will serve you well. It's on the house too, consider it your payment for having to put up with this hard crooked man.
She glared at Kale.
Someone needs to toughen her up more,
Kale argued.
Surviving in the slums takes cunning but surviving outside of a walled city, gonna need to be tough.
Gemma looked back to Irene and said,
sometimes a drop of wisdom can come out of his fountain of stupid, so be sure to keep an ear out for those rare moments and you might learn something useful from him.
Irene giggled a little. Kale did seem to talk a lot of nonsense here and there. After paying Gemma and Irene got into her fur outfit and carefully folded the other one and placed it into her bag, they moved along. During their next rest stop they kept the fire burning longer so Kale could start teaching Irene a little of how to fight. He had never taught anyone before and Irene was so small he couldn't teach her how to wrestle or fight with her fists, so instead he taught her how to dodge attacks and move around her opponent to get in close and strike with her dagger. He used the scabbard of his sword for practice since he didn't have an unsharpened practice blade to use, but it worked just well. Whenever she messed up her footing, or too eagerly advanced upon him, she was hit hard and came out with several bruises. She made little progress by the time they made it to the boundaries of the Kashmir forest, but they still had a ways to go before the tower. For the time being Kale told her they would halt all training until they were out of the forest and in the lands of the Evercane Kingdom. She needed the time to rest and heal anyways. They were careful as they went into the woods and Kale took selected paths. His hand was always wrapped around the handle of his sword and his eyes darting around as they went, but nothing came to them. The forest was disturbingly silent. When they stopped to rest and eat, Irene took it upon herself to practice a few maneuvers with her dagger while Kale continued his vigilance. By the third day of their trek through the forest he calmed down more and during one of their rest stops he said, I heard many strange whispers back in town about the animals leaving the forest, but I didn't truly believe it until now. It is kinda scary, Irene commented.
Downright eerie, more like it. Not natural for so many animals to be fleeing their homeland like this. Not even many squirrels, birds, or rabbits around here. Good thing I loaded up on supplies back in town, otherwise we'd be in trouble. I never ate birds, squirrels, or rabbits before, do they taste bad?
Irene asked.
At first they can, once you became used to normal food. But soon enough you stop noticing the bad taste and it just becomes food, sometimes good, most times you don't care enough though. The following days of journey through the woods were filled with more silence. Kale said very little and Irene had nothing more to ask of him at the time, though they grew accustomed to the silence now, eerie as it may be. Finally she started to grow tired of the forest, and was scared they were lost in it. How long until we reach the gate? She asked.
Kale thought about the answer briefly then answered,
at this pace, 2 days tops. How do you know where to go?
Irene asked a little doubtful of Kale. Kale raised his arm and pointed south.
Because I have been following the border wall to the gate. Right now we are still in the thicket, but the Great Elm Gate has a small clearing before it. The builder of the wall and the gate was very smart. He put it right by the edge of the forest, close enough to hinder people from the other side of it, but far enough from the trees to ignore reaching vines that would naturally tear away at it. As for the clearing itself before the gate, well, as it were, the forest is thickest between it on all sides. Simply impossible to get a horse through there without cutting the trees down, and units wearing plate mail have a hell of a time just getting through by themselves, so only those of us wearing light armor made it to see the gate. Dem thing is an even stronger defense point than that famous bridge of theirs, I don't know what it's called. Anyways, they could just take a dozen of their kingdom's best archers and pick away at our troops as we tried to get into that clearing. But that bastard Thrain was smart, and picked us off bit by bit while we searched for the gate. Whatever say I, it's a time long past and the king won't be fool enough to try that strategy again.
When they arrived at the Great Elm Gate they were met with an arrow shot down in front of their feet. They halted immediately and Kale kept his hands to his sides, away from his sword.
Who goes there?
Shouted a man from atop the wall above the gate.
Just a man with his daughter, searching for a better life beyond those walls,
Kale shouted back in answer. The archer was silent after that, but the gate began to slowly rise until half a dozen men came through it, then it shut itself. They stopped several feet away from Kale and Irene and studied them. Then the man in the lead of the group asked,
Why should we let you in? You're not traders, merchants, or rangers. What value do you have to the kingdom that's worth your entry?
Kale scoffed. He knew what the man was asking for, and he was entirely prepared to turn away if he didn't get a bribe worthy of entrance into the kingdom borders. But Kale also worried that if he paid him now they could just shoot them down with arrows and take the money. Guards that could be bartered into a bribe were decent men but not altogether honest, but guards who downright asked for one, even if in vague terms, could be altogether evil. He hesitated, still thinking, but the time to choose was now upon him and he had to make sure it was the right decision he went with. Setting his bag down, Kale reached into it for the bag of coins, keeping his eyes on the men while he did. He pulled the bag of gold out and tossed it to the man. He caught it and Kale turned his eyes to the archers to make sure they were not going to shoot him down now. The man looked into the bag, pulled out some of the coins, then tied it up and gestured for Kale and Irene to follow him and his men. The gate rose and they walked through the small tunnel. Once through, the man said, "Welcome to Evercane, don't go causing trouble while you're here now." Once they got some good distance from the gate, Kale relaxed and let out a sigh of relief. They had a lot of walking to do after that, but Irene had gotten used to all the walking from their journey through the forest. They stopped by the first town they saw along the way and Kale had enough money left over to buy a horse, although their journey was less hasteful since arriving in Evercane, and this gave Irene more time to practice. The two were surprised to find the tower base was enormous, stretching around for miles by their sights. Around the base of the tower, near the doors, was a small dock of wooden boards, standing just a few feet above the soggy ground. Kale heard rumors about the dying grounds around the tower but wasn't sure if that too was a myth. He figured some workers might have been commissioned to build the dock of wood by perhaps a noble from Evercane. Standing before the doors, lounging around, were just over a dozen men, 16 by Kale's counting. All of them mischievous looking, and dangerous. Kale knew this would be trouble he could not avoid and turned to Irene and said, "Get that cloak out and put it on. If trouble arises, imagine yourself being unseen and it will do the rest, then sneak around the men and go into the tower." Irene did as he said, pulling out the cloak and putting it on. Strangely, it fit her as well as it did Kale despite their size differences. She questioned him after it was on her, "And if trouble comes, then what about you?" "You worry about yourself and I will do the same. And keep your distance from me when you vanish, I don't want to be tripping over you in the middle of a fight." As soon as the men at the entrance doors noticed the two, they approached, one of them coming forward and halting Kale and Irene while the others stood back with wicked smiles on their faces. "There is a toll to be entering this here tower," the man said. 50 gold pieces, each." 50 gold pieces a person, seems rather fair for a chance at unlimited wealth and more," Kale said. The man smiled and his comrades half laughed, then he said, "Oh, I agree, it is a fair price, so pay up." Kale tilted his head back, eyeing the other men once more and said, "You know, I have to wonder how many strong men and warriors must have passed by here trying to get in only to have you stop them with a toll. I don't see any dead bodies around here, so all of them must have paid up. You all must be very strong to have scared such powerful men to paying your toll." "Yeah, we are, so pay up or get lost," the man said, his anger growing. "Then again, if you are that strong, then why not ascend the tower yourselves? With that wish you wouldn't need to be standing around here like a bunch of lowly thugs. But you know what I think you're all weak. And I know that if you don't get the fuck out of my way in the next 2 minutes, I'll cut you all down one by one." "Wrong choice of words, pal," the man said as he reached for his sword. Kale was faster though and punched him right in the nose. The man paused from pulling out his sword and Kale had enough time to draw his hand, lop the man's head off. Irene threw on the hood of her cloak, then imagined herself disappearing. She felt a tingling vibe all over her but otherwise had no idea if it worked. As the other men charged after Kale, Irene quickly stepped back to avoid the conflict. Kale met them head on, the ring of metal clashing filled his ears. He parried and blocked many of their swords, but they were too many and soon things were looking bad for him. One of them got in a good swing on his back, the blade slid harmlessly across his armor and Kale took down 2 more men by then. Irene began to move around them to the tower entrance as the sounds of metal clashing filled the air more. She got to the side of everyone when she heard another scream. She turned and saw another of the thugs drop dead and Kale still fighting strong. She made it to the entrance of the tower. Even this close, the inside looked like infinite darkness. She heard a scream. It came from Kale. She turned to see him fall to his knees, taking down another thug with him, though 3 still remained. The 3 remaining then shoved all their blades through his throat. Maroon blood spurted out from his mouth and he fell to his side, dead. The tears fell freely down Irene's face and she covered her mouth to quiet her scream. She was alone again, and had nowhere left to go, so she turned around and ran into the darkness. Chapter 13 Volga the Apprentice, Chapter 1. Volga sat quietly in the small study, poring over the contents of the heavy-bound leather book. He had been reading it slowly over the months, learning its great wealth of knowledge on magic. Most the magic he knew he learned from his master, but for some of the more ancient and powerful magics he was told to thoroughly read through some of the selected books in the library. It was hard work learning from those books, and he was still years away from mastering the spells, but Volga was excited all the same. With some awesome new spells up his sleeves, he might be able to impress some girls, make friends, whatever he wanted.
Oh twisted hells, and all that is evil, it's back.
A loud series of shouting roared through the house and completely interrupted Volga's train of thought. Exasperated, he closed the book with a loud thud and said to himself,
"And this why I don't know any cute girls."
Master Finnewer popped his head in the doorway and said,
"You don't know any cute girls because you don't go out and talk to them."
Volga rubbed two of his fingers between his eyes, somehow not surprised at his master's sudden appearance and in human hearing, and asked,
"What dare I ask is the problem this time?" "The tower, my boy, the tower!"
Finnewer exclaimed.
"Outside you must see for yourself."
The wiry old man then rushed out the doors without further explanation. Volga, with little choice, followed. Outside, Finnewer was pointing off in the distance, far out north.
"There, do you see it?"
Finnewer asked as soon as Volga came out. Not sure what he was supposed to be looking for, Volga shook his head. Finnewer then said,
"Are you blind, boy? The tower. Out in the distance, that dark tower reaching above the clouds."
Now that his master pointed it out, Volga did notice the dark tower, which just yesterday had not been there before. They were so far away that Volga's gaze just passed it by without a second thought, now though he couldn't look away from it.
"What is that thing?"
he asked.
"That is what I have been spending all my life preparing for,"
Finnewer said. A group of women passed the two by on their way from their morning errands, and Finnewer retorted,
"Well, most my life anyways."
Finnewer then went inside, absent-minded of any other thoughts, as he went straight up to the library, and for the first time in many years he shut the library door and locked it. Volga tried knocking on the door to see if his master needed anything, food, water, blankets. But there was never an answer, and as far as Volga could tell, Finnewer remained in the library until late into the night. By the time his master came out, Volga was half asleep, waiting outside the door in case he was needed. When he finally came out, he said nothing though and crawled into bed, not even bothering to cover himself with the blankets. Volga sighed and wrapped his master up carefully with the blankets, then went on to bed himself. The next morning Volga slept in, expecting his master to do the same. When he woke, his stomach was growling and demanding food be his first priority. So Volga went to the small kitchen and began preparing the morning meal for him and Finnewer. When the food was ready and set out on the plates on their small dining table, Volga shouted from the bottom of the stairs,
"Master Finn, breakfast is ready, it's sausage and oatmeal."
There was no response, so Volga expected him to still be asleep. He went upstairs and knocked on the door. When there was no immediate response, Volga opened it and stepped inside. He found Finnewer sleeping in his bed, silent as the grave.
"Master Finnewer, breakfast is ready, it's time to get up,"
Volga said. No answer, so he repeated himself, but this time louder, still no answer. Finnewer remained in his bed, eyes closed, unmoving, and not even the light sound of snoring. Volga rubbed his thumb and index finger between his eyes. This wasn't the first time Finnewer would try pulling this prank on him. He clapped Finnewer's shoulder, saying,
"All right, come on, this joke is older than you, and I'm not falling for it."
No answer still. Volga waited and scratched his brown messy hair. Then he began to move on, calling out behind him,
"Well, I guess I will just have to eat the rest of the pie after breakfast. Quite a shame too, I know raspberry is your favorite."
Volga then waited just outside the door, out of sight. Finnewer knew if he didn't get up, then his pie really would be eaten by Volga. After all, when Finnewer tried the same trick a few years ago, Volga went straight for the dessert and Finnewer had missed out on the last slice. Since then he was careful not to allow his determination for pranks to give Volga a perfect opportunity to eat their dessert. But something was wrong this time. Finnewer wasn't rushing out of his bed to stop Volga, he wasn't even up as far as Volga could tell. Now genuinely concerned, Volga rushed back into the room to check on him.
"Master Finnewer."
Once more no response. He went to his bedside and started shaking him.
"Finnewer, come on, this isn't funny. Finn!"
he cried out. Like a bolt of lightning, Finnewer sprang up in his bed.
"Cadbury cream boy, what is it?"
Volga fell on his butt, startled, but was smiling all the same.
"You scared me, master, you were not waking up and I was worried,"
Volga said. Finnewer tossed over his blankets and got out of bed.
I ain't rolling over in my grave just yet, boy,
Finnewer said.
Now go make breakfast, I'm starving.
Volga followed his master downstairs and said,
It's already made and laid out on the table.
The two sat down at the table and began to eat. Halfway through the meal Volga asked,
So what are we planning today? That tower off in the distance is mysterious, anything you can tell me about it? Maybe I can impress some cute girls with how much I know of it.
Volga was trying to move away from that morning's scare and onto something more intriguing. But what came next was just as gloomy. Finnewer put his fork and knife down at the questions and stared blankly at his plate, still half full of food.
I'm getting old, boy,
Finnewer said.
I was beginning to worry I would not live to see this day, but now that it's come I'm partially dreading I had.
Volga started losing his appetite as well and put down his silverware and asked,
What do you mean this day? Is it something to do with that weird tower in the distance?
Finnewer pushed his plate away from him and stood up.
Finish your breakfast then clean up. After that I will need you to go to the market and pick me up some items. I will have a list ready for you within the hour.
He then said nothing more and went back upstairs. Volga listened as the faint echo of footsteps above led to the library and the door shut afterwards.
Don't worry about me, Volga, my mind has finally disappeared in my old age,
Volga said to himself, trying to mimic his master. With his access to the library cut off, Volga couldn't study, so he decided that after breakfast he would begin cleaning up the house. After the dishes were washed and dried, all that was needed was some dusting and sweeping up the floors. It was simple work, but it was time-consuming, and his master didn't call on him until hours later when he was starting to get hungry for lunch. Finnewer called him into the library and Volga was stunned at how it looked after the short time his master had been locking himself in there. Before, where there were lines of neatly ordered bookshelves, with each book standing properly in its place, were piles of books scattered all through the small library. Papers thrown to the fray of the mess, and books so old they looked like they would at any moment crumble to dust, lay carelessly on top the lone table. For the moment Volga had been standing in the doorway with his mouth gaping, but he found his voice and asked,
What the hell happened in here?
Hey. Finnewer responded.
You've been in here less than 2 days, and look at the place, it's a mess.
Finnewer glanced around the room and said,
Yes, you will have a lot to clean up when I'm done, but never mind that now.
Volga rubbed his fingers between his eyes, as he did often when he was very irritated, and said,
Of course you would make me clean this up. Why do you think I have an apprentice? You're like a maid who cooks and cleans and only requires boarding, and some of my food.
Finnewer replied.
And here I thought it was because you liked me, but glad to know the truth after all these years,
Volga said. Finnewer smirked and said,
Anyways, we will worry about this later. For now I need you to go to the market and pick me up some very specific items.
Finnewer then turned and walked carelessly on top of the scattered books among the floor to get to the table. He carefully went through the mess of papers until finding the one he was looking for and holding it up, exclaiming,
Haha, found it.
He returned to Volga, handed him the paper and said,
These items may be very difficult to find unless you are cunning about how you ask for them. That or strong-arm the shop owner into getting it for you. On the back of the list is which shops have which items, but do not draw attention to yourself from the town guard. Most these items are, well, not strictly speaking legal to sell or be in possession of. So act discreetly.
Volga glanced at the list handed to him, then Finnewer grabbed him by the shoulders and looked him straight in the eye and said,
Now listen carefully, Volga, you must obtain every item on the list before you return. The full moon is fast approaching and time is running out.
He then handed him a small purse full of gold coins.
Tell the shopkeepers that I sent you for the items, and pay whatever they ask, no haggling with the price. If they tell you they don't sell that sort of item, there be insistent and offer them 3 gold pieces if they will, double check their stocks. Now try to hold off on that offer for as long as you can, and if they take the gold then check their stocks and still say they don't have what you need, then cover their mouth with your hand and cast the blood echo spell on them. You got it?
Volga shook his head and said,
I don't like that spell, master, the pain it causes is worse than death. I mean, do I need to resort to such extremes?
Finnewer let go of Volga and glanced away briefly, then said,
I don't like it either, boy, and let's hope that it doesn't come to that at all, but if it does you must not hesitate to use it, show them you're serious. You need only a few seconds at a time with it and shouldn't need more than 2 castings. Remember, it's a last resort spell in this situation. They do have what is on that list and tell them that you know they do. That ought to rattle their cage enough to go get it. All right,
Volga said.
When do you need me to go? Right now, and if you get hungry while you're out, grab something to eat with what's left in that purse, anything you want that you can afford, okay?
Volga looked back down at the coin purse then said,
I'm not sure if that's very generous of you, or if I'm going to have like 2 coppers left when I finish this list. Well, you won't know if you don't get a move on,
Finur said. Volga quickly changed out of his clothes and into finer ones and wrapped himself up in his cloak to look a little more subtle. He fastened the small hook on the purse to his belt and pulled over his shoulder the single-strap courier bag, placing the list inside it.
I will be back as soon as I can,
Volga said as he headed for the stairs.
Burn that list when you get everything,
Finur called out to him. Outside the day was sunny, with a few clouds drifting along. The faint smell of the approaching spring drifted along with the gentle wind breeze. Volga didn't get out too much, but on days like today he was happy to be outside, and when he saw Janice Kate his day brightened ever more. He smiled at her but she rudely turned away from, partially in disgust, and continued on her way. He frowned a little but was used to this sort of thing by now. After all, by normal definitions, he was unattractive, pasty skin, messy brown hair, slender and even a few inches short for his age. It was not like he could help how he looked, he didn't even own a mirror, so grooming was next to impossible. If only the girls would look past his appearance and give him a chance, he could show them he was a good mate. He may not have had much muscle, but he was a powerful magister and he knew it. Unfortunately, girls were only impressed with the puffed-out chests and biceps as big as their heads. Even so, looking at pretty girls cheered Volga up and took his mind off his troubles. Which today that's something he needed most, but he had a task to do, so he picked up his pace and continued on to the town market. The first shop he had to visit was the spice shop. Volga always wondered how a spice shop could be doing so well, but seeing how 3 of the items he needed were at that one shop, he was starting to understand their business capital. The small little spice shop had no one in it at the time, and the little man behind the counter was reading his book, without a care in the world. Volga went up to the counter and doubled a look around the shop before pulling out the list. He then held it up to the clerk's face and said,
I need the first 3 items on this list.
The clerk pulled his book down just under his eyes, swiftly read through the items and then raised the book back up in front of his face and said,
Sorry, no sell that here. Would you go check the back for me please? Master Finur would be very upset if it were not here.
Without looking away from his book, the clerk said,
I know this, Finur. And this is a simple spice shop, we only sell spices and keep reserve stocks in the back.
The man then tapped his middle and index finger on the counter 3 times. He kept repeating this for a moment, then stopped and went back to the full attention of his book. Volga stood there awkwardly for a long minute when he realized what the tapping meant. He then went into the coin purse, pulled out 3 gold coins and placed them on the counter. He slid them forward and said,
I insist that you check the back for me.
The clerk then casually placed the open book over the coins and in a swift movement folded the book up with the coins in it and got off his stool. He then went into the back and returned several minutes later with a small box. Putting the box on the counter, he said,
Your special delivery has come on, Mr. Apprentice, that will be 9 gold.
Volga then opened the package to make sure everything was there. It was, and he pulled out 9 more gold coins, mumbling to himself,
more like an arm and a leg,
and handed the clerk the gold. He then put the package into his bag and threw up his hood as he left the shop. As he headed for the next shop, he said quietly to himself,
I hope the others are not this tough.
When he got to the next shop and, led with saying who sent him, acquiring the items was much easier than the first one. Only the third clerk required another bribe, but since there were people in the shop, she took Volga to the back to inspect the items personally before taking the payment. Only one shop was left now, and Volga still had half the coin purse full of gold coins, but his courier bag was nearly full. Of course, the last shop would be the most eerie, shrunken heads hanging from the ceiling, weird moss growing on the walls with vines overlapping them. The shelves were colored a swamp gray and had various sized and shaped bottles lining them, each filled with some different colored luminescent liquid. It was simple magic to take distilled water and change its appearance and aroma to give it a sense of wonder and power and place it in a bottle and sell it. But as Volga gently brushed his fingertips across the bottles, he felt the power concealed inside. These were the real deal. Though real, not all the bottles were dangerous, most were relatively harmless in their quantity, as far as Volga could tell. But no doubt the stronger potions laid hidden in the back somewhere, and for the specific potion his master had sent him to retrieve, this shop would be the most likely to carry it at all. The shop was empty, no surprise there, so this place should go smooth as well. Volga approached the counter and showed the lanky man behind it the last item on his list.
Master Finur sent me here to retrieve this specific item,
Volga said. The clerk stared at the list, then went to say something, but Volga, seeing that look of denial that he had on a few of the other clerks, spoke up first.
I'm sure if you check in the back, you will find exactly what I'm looking for.
The lanky clerk squinted his half-dead eyes at Volga, then tapped 2 of his fingers on the counter in a simple rhythm of 3 taps before a pause. Another bribe was needed before the man would go get what he asked for. Volga went into the purse, pulled out 3 gold coins, and the man continued tapping his fingers on the counter. Volga glared at him, but the man said,
12 coins for what you asking?
He then went back into the purse and pulled out 12 additional coins to cover the bribe and the potion cost. He put them on the counter, and the man, after inspecting them, tossed them into a small sack and put it under the counter and said,
Thanks for your business, now get out. And what about my potion?
Volga demanded.
I told you, we don't sell that sort of thing here, now move along before I get town guard.
Volga turned away and walked slowly to the door. He stopped before it and with a wave of his hand put a veil over it and locked the door. He then went back to the counter and said,
Last chance to get my potion before things get ugly.
The clerk didn't flinch at all and said,
I told you we don't sell that sort of thing here, not in the front, nor in the back.
Volga shook his head and said,
You should have saved yourself the pain.
Then he grabbed the man by his shirt and pulled him forward. He quickly placed one hand over his mouth and then moved the other to grab the man's wrist as he flailed it. Then Volga concentrated on his spell and the clerk's eyes became blood red and he stopped moving altogether. Only thing he could do was muffle a scream of agony through Volga's hand. After a few seconds the spell stopped and Volga pulled his hand away from the man's mouth, allowing him to gasp for air.
Now then, shall we go to the back, or do you want to do that again?
Volga asked. The man, struggling to get back to his senses, looked up at Volga and said,
Eat shit, you little cun.
Volga quickly covered his mouth back up again and recast the spell, holding it for another 3 seconds before releasing the man. This time, after he could speak again, the man said,
all right, follow me to the back.
Volga went around the counter to the back and followed him down to a hidden cellar. The whole cellar was a stockpile of highly illegal potions and other materials or ingredients outlawed in Dorgal. Way in the back was a rectangle-shaped jar with a liquid of swirling pinks and reds swirling endlessly inside. The man pulled the rectangle jar off the shelf and handed it over to Volga. Volga put it careful in his bag, which barely fit it, and looked to the man and said,
If you get stupid enough to go to the guards after this, then remember, I'm still an apprentice, worst they will do is lock me up for a few years. But I will sell you out in a heartbeat, and this cellar of yours, all this stuff is worth a lifetime in the dungeon.
Volga then went into his coin purse and pulled out 2 more gold coins and placed them on the shelf and said,
or we can let bygones be bygones and neither of us have to deal with the council.
Then Volga walked out of the cellar and lifted the veil on the door of the main shop before leaving. Outside the day was still beautiful and the market area was bustling with life and good smiles. But even on days like today, carrying a bag full of highly illegal contents, which Volga was not entirely sure what they would be used for in combination, through the most crowded part of town is very stressful. And after the trouble of getting the last item, Volga lost any appetite he had and didn't care that he had enough money left over to get himself even the finest of meals. He just wanted to return to the house in one piece. He kept his hood up and head down as he swiftly walked out of the market area in a rush and took the shortest path back to the house. As soon as he was home and the door was shut behind him, Volga carefully put down the bag, pulled out the list, and with a small flame set the paper on fire and blew the ashes into the fireplace.
My god boy, you look like you seen a ghost, or a whole town of M.
Finur said as he descended the stairs.
Did you get everything?
Volga grabbed the bag and carried it to Finur and said,
Yeah, I got everything, and you know, shopping at the black market for a couple items at a time, not too bad. But getting this entire bag full of illegal crap in one afternoon, it's ridiculous. You know, if the guards had caught me with this stuff, then I'd be thrown in the dungeons until I'm as old or least as crazy as you.
Finur smirked and said,
If you get to be as old as me and are not crazy, then something is very wrong with you.
He then walked over to the bag and checked its contents, making sure everything he needed was there. Satisfied, he picked it up and asked,
Anyone give you any trouble when asking for this stuff? Just the last shop, the lanky guy in the potion shop.
Volga said.
Tried taking the bribe and the money for the potion without giving me the potion at all. I had to use the blood echo spell on him, more than once. That was a smart move. Treth is notorious in the black market for trying to scam people from getting their potions after paying him. Not like anyone can go to the guard and tell them what happened without screwing themselves over too.
Volga scoffed and said,
I hate that spell. Why did you ever have me learn it? To test you. Test me.
Finur then said nothing more and went back upstairs. He hollered down to Volga.
I'm going to be in here for a while, so no disturbances until I come out.
Volga was then left to wonder what his master was up to in there. But he knew that with those ingredients, whatever it was, it couldn't be good. Chapter 14 Volga the Apprentice, Chapter 2 For 3 days and 3 nights Master Finur remained in the library. Volga heard very little noises coming from the other side of the door, but now and again he would see strange lights emitting from under the doorway, flashing and weaving about. Volga always made sure to leave a tray of food and water by the library door in the morning after he woke up, and at night before he went to bed. He was glad to find the tray emptied whenever he returned for it. It meant his master was still alive and at least eating and drinking. But only on the 4th day did his master come out of the library with a look on his face that was equal parts frustration and sorrow. Finur said nothing to Volga and only muttered curses to himself as he went down the stairs. Volga followed him and asked,
Master, did the spell you were concocting work?
Finur stopped at the bottom of the stairs and stared blankly at the wall for a second until answering,
It worked. But it was damn bloody pointless, showed me nothing I needed. Showed you? What spell were you casting exactly?
Volga inquired. Finur went to the small enchanted box which they used to keep their drinks and meats or cheese chilled. Being a magister was nice for common household living. He pulled out a bottle of wine and popped the top with a bit of magic, then started chugging from it. He finished half the bottle before putting it down on the table. He turned to face Volga and said,
I was looking into the future, trying to find a different outcome for certain events that are coming. But there is only one way this all ends. The future? What was in it?
Volga asked, eager for an immediate answer. Finur pulled out a chair and sat down, then said,
Don't you worry about it at all. Future gazing is a dangerous thing. Many magi went insane from trying to decipher the mysterious of what they saw. It's something best left alone, that's why the council outlawed half the items I had you acquire. On their own, some would be practically useless, but in combination with the others they give way to a clearer look into the future.
Volga pulled up a chair next to his master, sat down and then asked,
So what did you see anyways?
Finur looked up and off into the distance. His eyes came out of focus as if staring off into faraway lands. A purple hue shined over his eyes and he said ominously, I saw. Volga leaned in closer, eager to hear what his master's fading voice was whispering. Then in a flash Finur's eyes went back to normal and he turned his attention to Volga and in a loud tone he said,
I saw my apprentice not fulfilling the wishes of his master.
Volga leaned back in his chair and scoffed.
Well, that was anticlimactic,
he said. A moment later the two laughed and Volga prepared their lunch. For a time things started going back to normal for Volga and Finur. Volga was still curious about that tower off in the distance, but Finur didn't tell him any more about it and so Volga didn't push it. Their mundane yet cozy life returned to normal, until the second full moon after the tower's appearance, where Volga had the dream about the tower and the promised wish at the top. Volga woke suddenly from his dream state and gasped for breath, as if it was all taken from his lungs mere seconds ago. He started to shake his head lightly to get out of his dreary state when a voice right next to him inquired,
You had the dream, didn't you?
Volga half jumped out of bed, startled that his master was sitting in a chair in his room, staring at him. He sat up in bed, scratching at his messy hair and asked,
Master, what are you doing in my room? No time for that, the dream, tell me everything you can now before it eludes your mind.
Finur said.
Yes, because some strange dream is going to explain why you're in my room, staring at me while I sleep.
Volga said.
The dream boy, now. Fine. I was still in my body, far as I could tell, but I was no longer here, I was all the way there to the base of that tower. The intricate demon designed on the door, its eyes glowing red, they seemed to be looking right through mine, piercing all the way down to my soul.
Volga shivered at the end of the last sentence.
Then the doors opened up,
he continued.
And as they did, something flashed in front of me, some kind of room with a crystal. After that I saw the last floor on the tower, the very top one. I can't seem to remember any details about it, but then the voice echoed in about the wish promised to the first one reaching that floor, and a warning about the tower inhabitants.
Volga rubbed his forehead in pain.
I'm trying to remember more, but the rest is blurry. No, that's plenty, I got what I needed,
Finur said.
Get dressed, do what you need to do after that, and then start cooking breakfast. After breakfast I will explain everything to you.
After breakfast Volga went to clean the dishes, but Finur said,
"Never mind that boy, come with me to the library, it's for me to explain things to you."
As Volga followed him up the stairs he asked,
"And by explain things, do you mean your erratic behavior last month and this morning?"
Finur said nothing until they made it into the library and got to the center table where 3 ancient-looking tombs, nearing the size of Volga's torso, lay neatly across it. They had nothing on the covers, and as Finur opened the center one up, Volga saw in them a writing he had never seen before.
"Can you read any of this?"
Finur asked Volga.
"Not a word of it, in fact I never seen anything like this before,"
Volga said.
I must have never taught you the language of the Druid before then,"
Finur said casually.
"Anyways, on the pages of this book is our ancient history and order of the Druid, but that's not what's important here."
He then closed the book and slid it forward until it fell off the table with a loud thud.
"Wait, order of the Druids, what?"
Volga asked.
"Us, or rather now just me and you, we're all that's left of the Druid order,"
Finur answered.
"Druids? Aren't Druids supposed to be like great magisters of the lands, able to talk with animals and grow any kind of plant from just a small sample of it? I don't know any of that stuff." "Bah, that's not what the order of the Druids are, you idiot. We are the protectors of the land, sworn to secrecy until the time comes when we are needed to restore the damage done to it, not some tree-hugging magi. But the order has faded away over the many years and now it's just you and I. Alas, I'm too old for this and you're too young to restore the damage that will come to these lands, or to restore the order of the Druids." "I'm going to stop you there,"
Volga interrupted.
"You keep saying we, but I never heard about any of this before, and shouldn't I have gone through some sort of initiation before becoming part of your order?" "Confounded boy, you have no patience,"
Finur said, agitated.
"Alright, you know what, let's skip the long boring history lesson and I'll give you the short version. That dark tower off in the distance siphons life from the lands, turning it into a dingy swamp land for miles around until it's had its fill, then disappears again. I don't know where it comes from, but it always seems to return, and when it does it starts drawing in people with promise of great power, that wish for example. It draws them in and feeds of their collective life force, slowly. Everyone who experiences that dream is infected with the tower's influence and are subconsciously drawn to it, driven by a desire like it's their destiny or something. They won't go mad from it even if they never go near the tower, so don't worry about it too much. Now then, the tower has been here for about 2 months now, which means it's already started sucking the life out of about 5 miles of land around it. It's not too much yet, but it will keep going for God knows how far. But there is a way to stop it, to in fact get rid of the tower for good." "Alright, go on,"
Volga said.
"From the outside the tower is indestructible, but from the inside it has one major weakness, the source of all its power, the redox crystal. It's the heart of the tower itself and the thing responsible for sucking out the life out this land, and it can be destroyed. Let me guess, doing so comes at a great and terrible cost or something?"
Volga interjected. Finur shrugged his shoulders and said,
"I don't know."
Volga raised an eyebrow.
You don't know, then how do you know all this?" "From the chronicle of the Druid who went in search of a way to destroy the tower the last time it was here. He found a way to do so, the redox crystal. But by the time he found the crystal it was too late and he didn't have the raw power to destroy it back then, so he made a journal. He even mapped out the path to get to it." "Alright, so what's all this got to do with me?" "Everything, I'm afraid,"
Finur said solemn.
"You may not be an official Druid, but you're the only apprentice I got and I'm too old to embark on this quest."
He placed a hand on Volga's shoulder and said,
"Volga, I need you to do this, not for me, or you, but for this whole world. No matter what it takes, the tower must be destroyed this time." "Why me though, why not take this to the council?"
Volga asked, a slight edge of fear in his voice. Finur pulled out one of the chairs from the table and sat down.
"Because the council only act if there is a direct threat or problem to or within Dorgal. They don't care about the outside world. Hell, those greedy bastards would probably try and climb the tower themselves just for that wish."
Volga pulled out the other chair and sat in it and asked,
"So you do believe there is a wish to be gained at the top?"
Finur thought it over for a minute, then said,
"Yes, I believe there is, but anything gained from that tower won't come without a heavy price, of that I'm certain. Anyways, as I said, you must do this, but you cannot do it alone." "Well, if you won't join me, and I cannot get the council to help, then how am I supposed to do it?" "You have to travel around and search for strong warriors, or magisters, good people you can trust. Tell them that you know where the real wish is at. Tell them the only way to get it is to shatter the redox crystal and put their hand on the orb hidden inside and make their wish. I don't know, make up something believable. So you want me to find good, yet strong people to accompany me to the tower, and find this mysterious crystal and destroy it?
Volga said, trying to explain to himself what his master was saying.
And in order to get them to join me I should lie to them about how that's the only way for them to receive the wish they desire.
Finnewer shrugged and said,
Yeah, pretty much.
Volga sighed and said,
Alright, let's say I managed to assemble this team on that lie, then what? I don't have any idea where the Redox crystal is. Oh yes, that.
Finnewer said, snapping to attention. He grabbed on of the other two tombs still on the table and schemed through it until he said,
Nope, not this one.
Then he closed it and slid it off the table like the other one before. He then grabbed the final tomb and flipped through the pages until finding what he was looking for. He pulled out a thick, gold-lined paper that looked like a very detailed map and had small writing covering the entire other side of it.
This here is the map I managed to translate and recreate into a more portable version for your journey,
Finnewer said, holding the map out for Volga to take. When Volga took it, Finnewer continued,
It shows you the layout of specific floors inside the tower and details on the back of how to follow it to the Redox crystal.
Volga spent a few minutes in silence looking over the map, then said,
According to this, the crystal is in the basement. Yes, so it seems,
Finnewer concurred.
I would have expected it to be at the top, not underground. Probably why the druid who found it took so long too, she expected much the same thing. Volga, tell me that no matter what you will find a way to destroy that crystal.
Volga was about to say he would try his best, but when he looked up and saw the serious look on his master's face, the desperation in it, he said,
Yes, I will do whatever it takes to destroy that crystal.
Finnewer smiled solemn and said,
You're a good lad, I will leave you behind everything I can to aid you in this quest. Leave behind, what do you mean by that?
Finnewer didn't answer him and instead stood up and started walking away. Volga followed after him.
Master Finnewer.
Finnewer stopped when they got downstairs and turned to face Volga, then said,
Volga, I have been alive for a very, very long time. I've been using magic to keep myself alive to continue the order of the druid, try and restore it even a little bit. But I failed in this. Sure, I had other apprentices, but some died, others just didn't believe in our ideals and went on their own. I never intended for another apprentice, but your grandmother, a former apprentice of mine, gave you to me when you were 3 years old. Your parents were dead, and your grandparents were soon following them into the grave when you were dropped off here. You had nowhere else to go, so I decided, what's a few more years of life? I was planning to raise you up to find your own way and would have left you everything when you were 16. However, the tower has appeared at last and I have no one I can ask to handle it besides you. But I'm afraid I cannot stay any longer to guide you any further. My magic is all used up now. What little reserves I had left were used up in that foresight spell I cast. Too bad it was in vain.
Volga struggled to hold back the tears and asked,
Where will you go then? I picked out a nice little spot for my grave a few hundred years or so back, a quiet little place where I can rest at last. I'm so sorry to put all this heavy burden on you, but so grateful you accepted it.
Volga wiped the few tears leaking from his eyes and asked,
What choice did I have though?
Finnewer grinned and said, As little choice as me. Then he pulled Volga into a long embracing hug. When his apprentice finally got the strength to let go, he turned and walked out the door, shutting it behind him. Volga immediately raced after his master to say goodbye, but as he opened the door, Finnewer was gone, not a trace of him around. Volga spent the next several days since his master passed away just sulking around the house. He did little more than eat and sleep in those days, still trying to come to terms with his master's death. He wanted to set out on the quest, but his heart just wasn't in it yet. He just needed some time, and alcohol. In the enchanted wooden rectangular box, Volga got the last of the wine and started chugging it down until it was gone. He got a minor buzz and for a time his pain was numb. But the next day it came back and he was out of wine. His master left him behind a chest full of gold coins. Apparently Finnewer was extremely rich. It made sense now why he never had to work and how he could afford anything, though why he didn't hire a maid to clean the house and a chef to cook their meals was beyond him. Volga took 2 gold coins from the chest and searched out the nearest wine merchant at the market. He found one but had a change of heart when he saw a group of people, not much older than himself, walk into a nearby tavern. He decided then maybe the crowd would cheer him up more than the wine. Inside the tavern he found a small empty table and ordered random drinks he never before heard of. None of them tasted good to him, but he drank them anyways, for the more he drank the less he could feel. Before long Volga drank so much he blacked out, waking up an unknown time later when the tavern was full of patrons. His head was throbbing and he felt a little dizzy, and ready to puke any minute. He got up from his seat and went for the front door, but a group of people came in from there, blocking his way and repelling him with all their loud talking. Volga then turned and headed for the back exit leading out into the alley. The back door swung wide open as he stumbled out, bumped into some stranger and fell at his knees. Unable to hold in the contents of his stomach any longer, he lowered his head further and puked all over the once fancy pair of shoes that were in front of him. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve and started to get up and say, "Sorry," when a burly fist slammed into his left cheek and hurled him to the ground on his side. The strike broke him from his half-drunken daze and he got a good look at the scene around him. In the back alley it was relatively dark, but 5 men were around, 2 of them holding the arms of a very pretty young woman, restraining her. Volga slowly shook off his daze, listening in to the men talking to figure out the story at hand.
"Leave him be, we can deal with him after her,"
one of them said.
"Alright, yeah, let's focus on the bitch at hand,"
another of the men said.
"Alright then, Kira, where were we? You and half your guys here were about to drop your pants and start sucking each other off,"
the woman said audaciously. The man speaking to her directly twisted sideways, delivering a swift and powerful punch to her stomach. She heaved over, the breath being knocked from her lungs, as the only thing keeping her up were the 2 men holding her.
"You know you shouldn't let me get in the way of your dick fest, boys," the woman, Kira, said. The man who hit her then delivered a backslap to her face. The other 2 men then pushed her down on her knees, and by that time Volga decided he had seen enough. He got to his feet and commanded, "Let her go." The men turned their attentions to Volga for a moment, then started to laugh, until he shot out a small streak of lightning that split into 3 bolts and zapped all but the 2 men restraining Kira. They fell to the ground paralyzed. The other 2 men then let go of Kira and charged after Volga. Volga thrust out his palm as the first man got close enough, and making contact with his chest he shocked him too. The second man was slower to reach Volga, but had pulled out a knife and got a good swing at him and sliced across his left shoulder. The cut delivered a stinging sensation like Volga had never felt before, and blood oozed from the wound, staining his purple robe. The man made a jab at Volga, but he managed to avoid it and kept backing away. The 2 kept up their little game, where the man would slash or jab at Volga with the knife and he would barely dodge it. Both of them were scarred of the other, so they did nothing reckless or anything more really. Before long Volga stepped back to a wall, and the man, thinking he had him, went for the kill, jabbing the knife at Volga's throat. Before the blade reached Volga though, the man suddenly jerked sideways and collapsed. Standing right behind him was Kira with a good-sized rock. She must have bashed him in the back of the head, Volga thought. Kira dropped the rock by her side and said, "Well, that got tiring to watch. You know you kinda really suck at fighting. You know I kinda saved your life back there,"
Volga responded. Kira shrugged and said,
"I could have taken them." "Then why didn't you?" "Well, as I was about to make my move, some purple-robed drunk stumbled out into the alley and then proceeded to hilariously puke all over the boss's shoes."
Volga blushed and turned his head away. Too embarrassed to be around the pretty woman anymore, he started walking out of the alley. Kira followed him and said,
"Hey, come on, it was all in good fun, at least let me buy you a drink to say thanks." "I would love nothing more, truly. But if you have not noticed, my shoulder has been sliced up, and it hurts really freaking bad, so I would like to go home, clean and patch it up." "I can do that,"
Kira said. Volga stopped and looked at Kira. In the light of the street he could see she was much prettier than he first thought, with flaming red hair, soft smooth skin and amber eyes.
"Why are you so eager to help me?"
Kira shrugged and tilted her head to the side and said,
"Well, I do owe you for your help back there, and I guess it is kind of my fault you got that injury in the first place. Besides, patching up a shoulder wound on your own is very, very difficult."
Volga smiled shyly and said,
"Alright, sure, let's go back to my place though."
Kira nodded and Volga led her back to his house. After they got inside, Volga found some clean hand towels he could use to cover the wound and stop himself from bleeding even more.
"Alright, so where is your medicine kit?"
Kira asked, looking around.
"Actually I don't have one here,"
Volga admitted. He then went into his pockets and pulled out a couple silver coins, handed them to Kira and said,
"Here, go out and get what supplies you will need, this should be more than enough to cover you."
Kira stared at the silver coins in her hand, silent in her own thoughts, then looked back to Volga and said,
"Alright, that's fine, but it's going to take me a while to get them, so sit there and don't move too much until I return, okay?" "I shall remain right here,"
Volga said. Then Kira left the house in a hurry, Soon as the door shut, Volga got up and climbed the stairs heading for the library. Not expecting her to return, he searched out any books on healing magic. When he found a couple, he carefully pulled them off the shelf one at a time and placed them on the center table. Taking a seat, he grimaced in pain from his shoulder wound, then looked over to the tower map lying flat on the far end of the table. He sighed and said to himself,
"I'm sorry, Master Finnewer, but I can't even save one person, let alone the whole world. I know I promised I would try, but I'm no savior or hero. I'm just a bad apprentice who can't even live up to his master's expectations."
Volga then blew the tower map off the table and out of his sights, trying to get that stupid tower and his master out of his mind. Chapter 15 King ARan, Chapter 2 ARan and Bethany returned to the council room where all were quiet and waiting for them.
"Has anyone gotten any fresh ideas?"
ARan asked as he took his seat.
"No, sire, I'm afraid we were more concerned with the surprising action of your seventh son and what we should do about it."
Charles, the head war advisor, asked.
"We shall take no action, as where he is going no longer concerns us. He has made his decisions and must live with them. Now then, let's move on. Time is not on our side, for if the people of ARan hear about that wish, they will flock to the tower and attempt to climb it. I'm sure most will die before ever getting halfway up, or give up before that, but there are notable and powerful knights and magisters there which could make it up if they had a considerable force backing them. So we need to find a way to get a battalion of our own men in there. Naturally I would be leading them. So does anyone have any thoughts on the matter?"
The room was silent for a time until Torith spoke up.
"Any attempt we make to invade through their gates in the wall is futile, as they have proven they can repel us quite well. And I heard Cantor tried invading from the forest, but that area is just as well defended. So with those two options out, why not just take some ladders and climb over the wall with our men?" "The Cantor Knights tried that many years ago before you were born," Charles said. "They have sentinels atop the wall that could spot you a half a mile away, and once they do, countless archers can converge in minutes and shoot you down before you or your men even reached the base of the wall to try it. And if you try that in the middle of the night, the issue of getting down still eludes you. Not only can you not see, but carrying an extra ladder up there to lead you down is impossible. Trust me boy, going atop the wall is the hardest way, and with only 2 gates that have proven unbreachable, there is no way into ARan when going through that damned wall."
They went back to their silent thoughts for a time until ARan spoke up.
"What about sailing around the wall and invade from the north?" "It can't be done, sire,"
ARan, the financial advisor, said.
"Ever since our port was burned down by the rogue company after our defeat at the River Mesa. No doubt the work of King Alden hiring mercenaries to do the dirty deeds for him."
Charles interrupted. ARan glared at Charles for an instant, then went back to his explanation.
"Anyways, after that we had been slow to rebuild the port, as it was never in high priority and our funds were never sufficient enough. We have of course a few small trade ships, but those cannot carry more than half a dozen men each, including the captain. So we can't enter ARan by force, we cannot sneak around them and enter from the north. Is there anything we can do then, something rational at least?"
ARan asked, his voice carrying his frustration clearly. Everyone looked down at the table. They had no more answers or solutions. After several minutes of this, ARan slammed his fist on the table and said,
"Fuck this nonsense, I need to hit something right now. Meeting adjourned for the day. I will call everyone back here tomorrow at first light. We're going to find ourselves a solution, even if it takes all day."
With that, ARan left and the members of the council quietly shuffled away too. Hours went by since the summit of the next council meeting, and still no one there had thought of an idea to get their forces into ARan. As ARan grew frustrated once again, he began to yell,
"What the hell do I even have a council for if they don't do anything more than just sit around quietly? Hell, I should take several good men and sneak into ARan myself and climb the tower on my own. In fact, that's not a bad idea." "Sire, I strongly advise against this matter," Charles said. "You're the king, and if you go missing suddenly people will notice, and we cannot have you risking your safety to challenge the gods' test. We will find a way together to enter ARan lands and ascend that tower with our forces. This is just another preliminary test of the gods that we must overcome. What if we work together with another force to get into the ARan lands?"
Torith asked.
"What, like mercenaries?"
Charles scoffed.
"Half those scum turn tail when the battle looks sour and take your gold with them. The other half charge you a king's ransom for their services and would turn on you if your enemy bids them more gold, which it so happens our enemy is sitting on an abundance of gold and can do just that." "No, you idiot, I mean another kingdom."
Torith turned his head to look at his father now and address him more directly.
What if we joined forces with Cantor? They wanted to invade Evercane as much as we did before, and I doubt even after their defeat their desire for its resources has waned. With their support we could overtake the bridge and march right into those lands. And then what? Turn and flee to the tower and leave them to conquer Evercane without our support? They would be crushed in a week without us. Sire, I think Prince Jorith may have a valid point,
Charles said.
We don't need to help them conquer all of Evercane, just help both sides get through the gate and then we will go our separate ways. They can move on to attempt to conquer as they see fit while our forces move to the tower. And once we, get that wish, then all these rival kingdoms will become irrelevant. And we just pretend like we have a shared interest in conquering the kingdom.
ARanDom remained quiet as he repeatedly tapped his fingers on the table, thinking to himself. He looked around at everyone around the table and asked,
And are my other council advisors in agreement with this alliance plan?
Bethany and ARanDom glanced at each other and nodded their heads.
Yes, my king, it seems our best option,
Bethany said.
I know you would like to go about forms of war with honor and high stature, but you can't fight in a battle and keep your cloak without getting a little dirty. This does seem our best and possibly only option.
ARanDom wasn't fully with the idea, but he didn't see any better options either and conceded.
Alright then, I suppose I shall write out the letter and send it off to King Jeremiah.
Several days passed by since ARanDom sent out his letter to the King of Cantor, and still he had yet to get a response. The owls of Aladern were the fastest messenger carriers and could fly day and night, so the letter would have arrived within a day of ARanDom sending it. He was positive that the owl made it fine, but he was anxious, for the more they made him wait for a response, the more time he lost on climbing the tower. The kingdom's troubles were dying out too as spring began to blossom, and many of the common folk that survived the winter had little to complain about. No, it seems their sights were all turned to the tower as well. They too seemed to have gotten the same dream. When Maestarlina finally came to ARanDom with the letter, he was more irritated than delighted, for the response had taken a third of a moon cycle to arrive to him. He unrolled the aged paper and pored over the contents.
King ARanDom Tarok, I am honored that you have invited me and my kin over to your great halls to discuss opportunities of new prospects between our kingdoms. I apologize in advance for the delay in response. There has been some minor troubles in my kingdom, nothing to worry yourself over, of course. We shall arrive at your doorstep shortly before the next full moon. Please make suitable accommodations for us by then. King Jeremiah Galero.
ARanDom rolled the letter back up and handed it to Maestarlina. As she took it, she gazed curiously into his eyes, questioning its contents.
That plump king is coming here so that we may discuss our future alliance proposal in a more etiquette manner,
ARanDom said.
I would have much preferred that I journey there. He and his kin won't arrive until the next full moon, or close to it, so we have plenty of time to clean Galliac halls and prepare for their arrival. No doubt we're going to have an extravagant feast for his fat ass, so keep the chefs on their toes. I don't want them cooking the half-decent crap they do every day here while King Jeremiah is around. I want them cooking at their finest for that time. I didn't know His Highness cared so much about the thoughts of such a plump and lazy king,
Maestarlina said, a slight mocking tone in her voice.
I don't. Any man that allows himself to get that out of shape should be buried alive with a small shovel. If they can dig their way out, there is hope for them yet. Anyways, King Jeremiah is a simple enough man to manipulate. If there's one thing my dear mother taught me, it's how to manipulate your temporary allies. God rest my father, but our kingdom would have been in ruin if not for the guidance of my mother. All that aside, King Jeremiah is no fool. He knows my temper and my lack of patience at times like this, and is trying to use that to his advantage. Give that letter to my wife, and when she's done reading it, tell her to come see me. I'm going to need her help in this prolonged endeavor if we're to succeed.
Maestarlina bowed lightly and walked away until ARanDom called out to her.
And Lena,
he said, hesitant in following through.
You were the last person to see him before he broke out. Did he seem fine to you?
She gave it some thought before answering.
He was hurt, but he's stronger than any of you give him credit for. I am sure he's reached the tower by now, but as for what he will find in there, that's beyond me entirely.
With that, Lena left to deliver the letter to Bethany and help make the preparations.
He's obviously playing you,
Bethany said after having read the letter over again for the third time.
Yes,
ARanDom said.
No doubt he will spend some time in the enchanting land of Dorgal while he passes through. The trip should normally take him a couple weeks tops, since we do have an open and well enough guarded trade road he could take. But there is something else too, something in that letter. Oh?
Bethany inquired, curious about what she could have missed.
Please enlighten me. I don't know exactly what it is, but I have a strong sense there is something he is not telling me, us. I cannot be sure about it, but I do feel as if there is something he knows that we don't, and he is patiently waiting to spring it up on me during our meeting. Good news or bad?
ARanDom sighed.
Still, I don't even know that much, all that I have are suspicions. And there is nothing to be done until he arrives. I need you in this, Bethany. I need you to back me up when I doing it right and stop me before I do it very wrong. The fox is entering the wolf den and is stupid enough to antagonize him there. If I'm not careful, he will antagonize me too much and I may stupidly attempt to bite the fox's head off and murder all his kin too. We could of course take over Cantor by force, but that would take too long, and by then someone else would surely have reached the top of the tower by then. I know this is the first major test from the gods, but I can't pass it without you.
Bethany put her hand on ARanDom's cheek and said,
Oh my dear sweet king, I would never abandon you. We will do this together as we always have.
She then leaned in to kiss him and he met her the rest of the way. They soon retired to their bedchambers to forget their worries for a time and make love. Gradually all of Galiac Hall was cleaned thoroughly through the weeks and the preparations for King Jeremiah were made. It was done in little haste, so the castle was more garnished than it ever been before. ARanDom personally never cared how decorative or elegant the castle looked, so long as it was clean enough to live in for higher born. The whole Tarok family had never been much for aesthetics, they were a more practical family, which is why they built their home castle in the side of the mountain. Greater for defense, and harder for any coward who would be to flee, they would rather die fighting to the last man than run away from a battle in their own home. But because they had special guests arriving, everything needed to be as good as possible to please them, or at the least give them something to be distracted with. The less things he had to complain about, the better their talks of an alliance would go, so ARanDom had hoped. When the day of the full moon finally came, King Jeremiah, his wife, and their 3 children arrived on the main trade road. It was no surprise when they came in garnished carriages, each carrying one the royals. Cantor was not a poor kingdom, but not very well off either. This didn't stop King Jeremiah from showing off like they were though. ARanDom stood outside the castle since morning with Bethany and Torith, waiting for their honored guests. It was high noon now, and ARanDom expected Jeremiah not to show up any sooner but just in case he did, ARanDom waited. As the gold-trimmed carriage stopped in a line, the men driving them rushed over to open the doors. Most of these men were short and fat, but the first one was scrawny yet tall fellow who rushed over to the door to open it. As King Jeremiah stepped out of his carriage, the thing began to tilt down to the side, so much it threatened to fall over until he stepped out of it. Torith muttered under his breath, so like Bethany and ARanDom had trouble hearing him,
Gods, the man is so fat his own carriage tilts from him stepping out.
ARanDom stifled a laugh, but Bethany let out a light snort. And indeed King Jeremiah was a very fat man. He had medium height and thin blonde hair, but his weight was so excessive he looked almost like a living, off-color, tomato. As Jeremiah's wife and children's carriages pulled up, ARanDom approached him pulling out his blade. The company of knights that helped escort Jeremiah and his kin kicked their horses' hips to ride to their king, but Jeremiah held out his hand, signaling for them to stop. They reined the horses in check before they got too much momentum, and ARanDom continued forth, nothing standing in his way between him and the fat king. When the two were just a couple feet apart, ARanDom held his blade out flat on his open hands and said,
By the honor of my blood, my name, and my house, I invite you into my home and offer you my protection until you leave these walls. My sword shall remain in your hands until such as the time as you are gone from here.
Jeremiah raised an eyebrow and suspended for a moment before taking the blade and admiring it.
Fine craftsmanship, very fine. But it will be hard for you to protect me without your blade.
Jeremiah then carelessly tossed the blade back to ARanDom, who snatched it out of the air safely, without even a small flinch. He sheathed his sword, and Jeremiah's wife and 2 daughters came forth to stand next to their king. His wife Cecilo was a rather heavy-set woman too, nearly as fat as her husband. To ARanDom's surprise, though their 2 daughters were thin and rather beautiful. They took after their parents with golden hair and bright-colored eyes. They both appeared to be in their mid to late teen years. Jeremiah introduced his wife and daughters to ARanDom and his family at present. The eldest daughter was named Kurina, while the youngest Lesel. Cecilo made sure to note that both their daughters still had their maidenhoods and were unbound to any suitors as of yet. At least one of them was serious about the alliance, there was hope for it yet. With introductions done, ARanDom led the way to the castle, heading straight for the dining area, since no doubt Jeremiah would be famished.
I noticed your son did not join on this trip,
ARanDom said.
Yes, I felt this was a good opportunity for him to learn a little about what it's like to rule the kingdom, since one day he will be king after I am gone.
Jeremiah said, a little glee in his voice.
But that day won't come for many years, I hope. Well, when we go to the dining hall, let us raise a glass in toast to your continued health. I have some well-aged barrels of Metron wine, tucked away for occasions such as these. Most of us here in a Latern prefer ale to wine, so when we get a good wine, we sit on it until it's needed. It sounds like you people must have a fine collection of wine then,
Ceclo said absent.
You will have to be the judges of that at dinner,
Bethany said, slyly joining into the conversation and moving it away from the focus.
But first let's get all of you settled into your rooms. It was a long journey here. I'm sure you would all benefit from a little rest and a good chance to stretch your legs.
When Jeremiah and his kin were all settled into their rooms, ARan invited him on a tour of the castle, where he tried to begin an early and private discussion on their alliance. But Jeremiah shot it down early and said first thing tomorrow, after he had a good meal and rest, which translated to ARan as, after I pig out on your finest food and wine, can we discuss anything of note? At dinner, and to no surprise for ARan or Bethany, Jeremiah and Ceclo Galero alone in the one night drank 3 caskets of wine between the two of them, and their king's guard, the 12 knights companying closest to their carriage, drank another 5 caskets between all of them. Their daughters, Curina and Lesel, ate very little themselves and tried their best to stay away from any meat. But Bethany made sure the girls at least got a small plate of their own bacon. It seemed a shame not to let them at least have a taste of some real food. Jeremiah and Ceclo both got very drunk at that evening dinner and needed the help of their guards to walk back to their room. Half of their guards were drunk as well and the other half were getting there. ARan watched the whole thing with glaring eyes. As Bethany took his hand to calm him down, he said quietly to her,
"The man's a damned fool. Getting this drunk is one thing in another man's kingdom and castle, but allowing half your king's guard to become almost as drunk as you. He's testing me, testing my earnest towards this alliance."
Bethany glanced over to the king and queen as they were half being carried away and asked,
"Is he only pretending drunk then? He did have a lot of wine." "No, he is really drunk, but he left his son absent to rule the kingdom, a smart move, but on his travels here he only brought his king's guard to accompany him, and our scouts found no traces of more men joining him, not from the road nor from any other viable path. I kept them on lookout just in case, but I don't believe he has any more men coming. King Jeremiah Galero is up to something, I just don't know what yet."
Bethany kissed ARan on the cheek and said,
"It's late, the dinner is ending, let us rest for now and worry about all this tomorrow."
ARan waited a little while longer until Princess Curina and Lesel were heading off to their bed chambers themselves, then he and Bethany retired to their own chambers to rest. Jeremiah, of course, slept in until early afternoon hours and was only concerned with breakfast as soon as he and Ceclo awoke. ARan had anticipated this and had the chefs ready and waiting for them whenever they awoke. ARan found even after breakfast for a good time that Jeremiah was enjoying, to a point, avoiding the subject of talks about their alliance, but with a little help from Bethany and Torith he managed to corner Jeremiah into it and they sat down in the council room to discuss it.
"There can be no argument when I say that Evercane's defenses are a formidable foe,"
ARan said.
"The fact that both our kingdoms on separate occasions attempted a full-scale invasion into their lands and failed means a significant endeavor awaits us if we are to try that again, that is alone."
While ARan spoke, Jeremiah and Ceclo were content to half listen while enjoying their wine.
"Obviously, you know why I called you here. You're a smart man, King Jeremiah Galero. I believe with our united power we could burst through Evercane's defenses within a day and conquer their lands in a month, maybe less."
Jeremiah finished off his cup and got a refill before he replied,
"Yes, I think our kingdom's combined forces could accomplish just that."
He paused a moment to drink from his wine glass before continuing.
"However, there lies in a couple problems with this idea. The first is relatively small, being that there is only 3 viable points to invade Evercane from. We must first decide on which is most optimal for both our forces. And the second major issue is the allocation of resources. We know that Evercane is a wealth of gold and silver and copper. But what about their silks, their crops, the hunting grounds? And how much of the conquered lands do we allow the people who surrender to keep, given it is after all their native homelands?"
ARan had not fully thought of much of this. It was indeed a good issue to be addressed. He chugged down his own goblet of wine before saying anything.
"Well, for now I think we should put the matters of the prime invasion spot on the bottom of our list. As for the equal distribution of resources, I agree that we shouldn't be so greedy as to take everything from the people of Evercane. Perhaps though, after we discussed what should be our own, we can talk to those smart enough to surrender about the terms of lands and resources they may keep as their own. How about we start with the matters of currency, the gold, silver and copper mines I mean. I think we should split the gold mines in equal division, half for us and half for you."
Only in talks of gold did the Queen of Cantor perk her ears up and join in on the conversation.
"How much gold do great warriors such as yourselves really need?"
Ceclo asked petulant.
I mean not to take away from you a hard-earned prize, but truly, what do the great warriors of Aladern have need of so much gold? I'm sure in place of your half of all those mines you would rather take a sixth of them, but for a far better trade of hunting grounds, your lands seem to be a little bare on all the good prey or farming lands. You're right, many warriors of our kingdom have a small desire of gold,
Bethany said.
But gold is in fact the global currency of this world, and though we may not always want it, it is still a vital necessity.
Cecilo was about to continue her argument about why Kanto needed the gold more than Aladern, but Jeremiah stopped her and asked in her place,
before the thought loses my mind in all this talk of resource distributions, might I ask for a few casks of this finely aged wine to be loaded in our extra carriage? It would be such a shame if my son, and some of the other nobles of Cantor of course, didn't get a taste of such delights.
ARan took in a deep breath of frustration and exhaled it slowly, no longer trying to hide his annoyance. He stared Jeremiah down darkly for a minute or two before calling to his guard and commanding him to retrieve a few casks of the wine from the cellar and to help Jeremiah's men load it up into their extra carriage.
Thank you so much, ARan, my son will love this stuff no doubt. Now then, do let us continue without further interruptions on these matters.
They continued the talks of resource distributions for a while more until Jeremiah and Cecilo stopped them so they could eat. ARan arranged for their meals to be brought to them in the council room so they could continue the talks while they ate. However, Jeremiah and Cecilo would not say a further word about any of it until after they ate. When they finally finished, the talks continued for a couple hours more until, out of seemingly nowhere, Jeremiah blatantly interrupted Bethany with his own question,
and what about the tower, who gets to lead their own forces in there?
His question was the only thing that sounded absolutely serious from him since his arrival. It was so sudden and surprising that ARan was caught off guard by it and left speechless, Bethany too.
Come now, ARan, let's get to the real point of why you suddenly called on us for an alliance after all these years,
Jeremiah said.
You two had a dream about the tower, and the wish promised to the first one to reach the top. The fact is that it seems all of Grimner has had this dream as well. I'm not surprised you thought you were the only ones though. That's part of the reason I passed through Dorgal on my way here. I wanted to see if their people had the dream as well, and maybe see if any of them had something to offer my kingdom in aiding us to acquire that wish. I'm sad to say they offered us nothing and all but kicked us out for the mere mention of it. So I came here to see what you had to offer us, and with no disrespect to you, but regardless of what you believe you're capable of, that wish is mine, and mine alone. So I ask you, what do you have to offer me and my kingdom after I acquire that wish?